Good morning. Just about. It rained and rained and rained and rained. The average fall was well maintained. And when the tracks were simply bogs, it started raining cats and dogs. After a drought of half an hour, we had the most refreshing shower. And then the most curious thing of all, a gentle rain began to fall. Next day was also fairly dry, save for a deluge from the sky, which wetted the party to the skin, and after that, the rain set in. This anonymous poem is on display at the Fiordland Visitor Centre at Tiano, but it's not the amount of rain that strikes me here. It's the striking beauty that makes the temperamental weather worth it. And don't we know about temperamental weather? Now, we all know that we're not going to be going into Milford Sound tomorrow because of the weather across the journey here. But the weather in Milford Sound is strikingly terrible, and it rains an average of 200 days a year. So the chances are we are just missing a rainy day. But we are cruising to one of the most naturally beautiful countries on the planet. It is a land so remote that it was spared centuries of human disturbance, and it remains to this day one of the greenest nations on Earth. And it's a well-known point of trivia that there are more sheep in New Zealand than people, and we will get to the sheep and other animals in a bit. But perhaps even more arresting and mesmerizing is the actual land itself. Or, in the case of the Fiordland National Park, the interaction between the water and dramatic cliff-drop towers of rock. This place is stunning. And we'll start our presentation, not the cruise unfortunately, with an absolute highlight, Milford Sound. Milford Sound is one of New Zealand's top natural attractions, set within the Fiordland National Park. It's in the southwest of New Zealand's South Island, the more beautiful and less populated of the two main islands. The whole park is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but despite its name, Milford Sound isn't a sound at all. It's a fjord. A sound is generally wider than a fjord and lies parallel to the coastline, often between a mainland and an island. Whilst it can still be formed by glacial recession, sounds are usually the result of the sea encroaching on a river valley. A fjord, however, just like Milford Sound, confusing, I know, is a narrow, steep-sided valley filled with seawater, often with a depth much greater than the nearby seabed itself. Its mouth, though, where it opens up to the sea, is usually quite shallow. In the particular case of Milford Sound is hemmed in by walls of rock that stretch up thousands of meters, carves a 13-kilometer passage through its dramatic track. The Sound's dominant feature is the 5,560-foot peak of Mitre Peak, which, even though it is summer, could still be topped with snow. For a couple of reasons. First, it's very high, and second, New Zealand has very iffy summers sometimes. Now, opposite this peak, Bowen Falls joyfully tumbles 520 feet before exploding in mist as it reaches the fjord. But despite its magnificent scale, the entrance to the fjord is easily missed. In fact, the entryway to Milford Sound is so small that the legendary explorer Captain Cook successfully missed the entrance not once, but 2 times. The first European to visit the fjord was a man named John Gronow in 1823. And with all the best intentions of someone who spent most of their school geography classes staring aimlessly out of the window, he named it Milford Sound, after Milford Haven in Wales, and the name stuck. There's barely a corner of Fiordland National Park that isn't teeming with wildlife. From bugs, birds to dolphins, fur seals. And it's not just the animals which are interesting to spot in this part of the country. Even the water itself is fascinating. Now, most of a fjord's water is salt water, in this case from the Tasman Sea. But due to heavy rainfall and surrounding rainforest, the top layer of water is fresh water. The rainforest runoff into the fjord creates a beautiful inky black effect. Now, unfortunately, we are not going to be going into the fjord due to the bumpy journey to get there. And so I won't be making any announcements tomorrow about the fjord itself. We were going to be joined by an interpreter, like a park ranger. That's unlikely to happen. I don't think we're still being able to meet that person. If we are, I will make sure that you know about it. And that way we'll at least be able to get together with him and he'll be able to talk to us more about things. But I don't know that we are even going to be stopping at the pilot station at all. If we keep going a little bit further on the notes, please, thank you. You can probably keep going a little bit more, actually. We miss a couple of bits there. All right, let's stop on that part. So, why has New Zealand got such a dramatic coastline? Well, a lot of that comes down to what's going on underground. Because New Zealand is on the edge of a plate, the Indo-Australian tectonic plate. And when moving plates meet, they tend to, quite literally, rub each other up the wrong way. Sometimes they grind past each other, causing earthquakes. Other times one might slip underneath the other, resulting in a tsunami. Or, as in the case of New Zealand, they might roar up out of the ocean in the form of mountainous volcanoes. With this comes the agricultural benefits of beautifully fertile soil and the additional dangers of eruptions and seasickness on land. Anyway, unlike Vesuvius towering over Pompeii or Mount Fuji in Japan, New Zealand's volcanoes are still active. All 9 of them. 10 if you want to include the submarine volcano smouldering underneath the water off the coast. New Zealand is a proud card-carrying member of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Right now, beneath New Zealand, the Indo-Australian plate is forcing the Pacific plate down into the Earth's mantle, resulting in the plate melting in the immense heat, producing a subsequent charge of molten magma, which, looking for a release, sometimes finds it in the form of a violent eruption. Of course, scientists are constantly monitoring New Zealand's fierce and fiery friends for any signs of increased activity, but that doesn't stop the volcanoes from erupting. And the most recent eruption, which resulted in loss of life, was just a few years ago in 2019, December the 9th, 2019. And the country's most active volcano, White Island, blew her top again. And by the way, think again if you're thinking that volcanoes are only found in New Zealand's rural areas. You wouldn't build a city on a volcano, would you? Auckland is built on a volcanic field, surrounded by 50 volcanoes, which form their hills, lakes and basins that wrap around the city. Rangitoto Island, a half-hour ferry ride across the water from Auckland, was created in a monstrous eruption just 600 years ago. A blink of an eye in geological terms. There's a bus on the island that will take you from the ferry terminal to the boardwalk of the crater, where there's an awe-inspiring lookout point. It's not all just fire eruptions, though. New Zealand is, quite literally, bubbling with thermal energy. From geysers, geothermal hot springs, bubbling mud pools, even a hot water beach. The intensity of the tectonic heat below creates some of the world's most incredible all-natural bubble bath experiences. The largest geyser, Pahutu Geyser, has enough power to blast jets of steam and water 30 meters into the air, and enough stamina to erupt up to 20 times a day. It's just 5 minutes from Rotorua town centre. Ooh. That's how I feel today. And whilst this makes Rotorua a fabulous place to visit, it does also have the distinct disadvantage of making it a somewhat stinky city too, with the unmissable whiff of sulphur drifting upwards from parks, riverbanks and drains. If you want to combine this natural phenomenon with traditional Maori culture, then perhaps head up to Hell's Gate, just outside Rotorua. And this is the city's most famous geothermal attraction. And it's a sacred Maori site as well, with 50 acres of mud pools, geysers, hot springs, the Southern Hemisphere's largest hot water waterfall. And one last hot water feature, and then it's time to explore the agricultural benefits of this volcanic land. And that is on the tip of the Coromandel Peninsula, there's a world-famous beach. Now, there are a few beaches around the world that get themselves a reputation. In the Bahamas, it's the pigs. In Cable Beach in Western Australia, it's the camel rides. In Copacabana, it's the prostitutes. Oh, in New Zealand, it's the make-your-own hot tub beach. Yeah. You need to visit at low tide, and you need to bring a spade because you will be digging your own bathing pool, but they are available to hire from the local cafes because they know that you're not there for the coffee. You're just there to dig your own hole. But you dig a hole on the sand, and it will soon naturally fill up from below. It will seep up from below with this natural, nutrient-rich warm water. Gorgeous view in a perfectly warm little hot tub looking out to sea. It's beautiful. But reclining and chilling out is only one part of New Zealand's way of life. In reality, the nation's connection with the land and commitment to top quality agriculture and farming means that it is a tough life of hard work for many Kiwis. Farming is a huge part of life in New Zealand. After all, it is the country's largest industry in both the North and South Islands, and both islands feature sprawling landscapes of farms and grazing cattle and sheep. And it's difficult to separate New Zealand from the sheep. New Zealand's quality of lamb raised here on these volcanically fertile green pastures is so high that it demands a premium price wherever in the world it is sold. For the past 130 years, sheep farming has been New Zealand's most important agricultural endeavour, and the country has held the title for the world's #1 exporter of lamb for as long as anyone can remember. But it's not just meat. About 220,000 tons of wool is shorn from New Zealand's sheep every year, producing some of the finest merino wool you'll find. So when you see local-made wool clothing in these ports that we're coming up to, you're going to know that you're onto something good. And they're going to charge you as if they know you're onto something good as well. And I know I've mentioned it a couple of times that there are more sheep than humans in New Zealand. So do you want to guess how many there actually are? I'm going to start you off by letting you know that the human population of New Zealand stands at 5.1 million people. How many sheep are there? Okay. Keep guessing, I'm having a drink. Okay, I'm just going to put the lid on because it's rolling everywhere. Back in its cage. Okay. Some of you are quite close, actually. For every person, there are 5.1 sheep, making an estimated sheep population of the country a baffling, thank you, 26 million sheep. It's a lot of sheep. But if we're talking about sheep, I feel like we also want to talk about kiwis. But what kind? Why do we need to choose? We can do both. We'll talk about both. Because even though the kiwi fruit originally comes from China, its other name is the Chinese gooseberry, the humble, green-scented, fluffy brown fruit is New Zealand's largest horticultural export by value. But we all know that I couldn't do a talk about New Zealand's nature and wildlife without talking about its national bird. Unlike Australia, where every animal seems to have vampiric tendencies and an insatiable thirst for human blood, New Zealand doesn't have any deadly animals, save for the odd disoriented sea snake that might wash up on the shore. They have instead a tiny, timid little creature that is so intertwined with the country's identity that even the people are called by the same name. And I am, of course, talking about the kiwi birds. Small, flightless, nocturnal, and very timid. New Zealand's national bird is approximately the size of a chicken, but not nearly as confident. And the chances are we won't see any of them. Chances are you'd be better off buying a scratch card, then putting in an offer on the nearest castle for sale before scratching away any of the boxes. Kiwis can live for between 25 to 50 years. Their chicks hatch fully feathered, and after around 5 days in the nest, emerge to feed independently. This fiercely independent bird is never fed by its parents. And in a way, its approach to the challenges of life make it the perfect animal ambassador for a country as geographically isolated as New Zealand. If you want to see a kiwi during your voyage, in this part of the voyage, your best bet is to visit a zoo or an animal rescue centre. The National Aquarium in Napier is probably the best place for this. It's better known for its kiwi enclosure than it is known for its fish, because even experienced twitchers might struggle to find kiwis out and about in the wild. But if you want to put in an offer on the nearest castle, well, there's only one castle in the entire country, and you'll find it just outside of Dunedin. It's Larnach Castle. It was built as a private residence of the prominent 19th century architect William Larnach, for whom this humble house wasn't quite enough. But do be warned, if you're in the market for a unique New Zealand pad, Larnach Castle has a reputation as one of New Zealand's most haunted buildings, with reported sightings of a Victorian ghost, unexplained smells of cigar smoke and port in unoccupied rooms, and the sensation of being pushed in your lower back as you walk around. It's even featured on dedicated ghost hunter TV shows in New Zealand and the United States. But this was not a talk about supernatural New Zealand. This was a talk about natural New Zealand. So let's round things off with something very natural. Let's talk about wine. In recent decades, New Zealand has burst onto the international wine scene with quite some vigor. The country's cool maritime climate is ideal for growing many popular and high-quality grapes, filling bottles with Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Merlot, to take a few of the best of them. Many of the nation's top wineries are open for tours. So let's wrap up today's talk with the story of how wine came to town. It started in 1819 with James Busby. Now, James Busby planted his first grapes on the North Island. And if you recognize the name James Busby, it's because it was at his house that the monumental Treaty of Waitangi was signed between the British and the Maoris, setting the constitutional basis for modern-day New Zealand. Well, in addition to renting his house out for treaty signings and photo calls, James Busby was a hobbyist viticulturalist. And over the following 20 years, he tended dutifully to his vines before creating the first known bottle of New Zealand wine. But New Zealand's powdery mildew and the proliferation of a root-killing louse dealt heavy blows to Busby's boozy legacy. So it wasn't until the 1970s, and the arrival of some hardier European grape varieties that the industry looked like it might have legs. Not just in the glass. Thank you, thank you. Oh. That would have gone better if we weren't all feeling a bit woozy. Anyway, as with much of New Zealand's story, it was two immigrants who kick-started the new industry. But not from the UK, not from the Netherlands, or to be honest, not from anywhere that's particularly known for its wine. Acid Corbin hailed from Lebanon, of all places. The other well-regarded wine pioneers came from Croatia. The following decades saw a steady increase of interest in New Zealand wines, especially Sauvignon Blancs, which captured the attention of British wine critics in the mid-1980s, and suddenly people who were in the know about wines were clamouring for a bottle of New Zealand's. Well, today wine is one of New Zealand's major exports, providing merriment to Australia, the UK, the US, and beyond, with a particular favourite still being that Sauvignon Blanc, especially from Marlborough, which has become something of a worldwide benchmark for the varietal, with a more intensely perfumed and fruitier flavour than the well-known French version. Many vineyards have a cellar door where you can taste and buy bottles from the vineyard itself, or alternatively, local bottles are available for sale in local shops and supermarkets, which is usually the better place to get them because you do get them at a better price. So, for fans of reds, keep an eye out for Pinot Noir on the South Island and heavy-bodied grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot and Malbec around Hawke's Bay and Auckland on the North Island. And if whites are more your taste, then really it must be Sauvignon Blanc or Riesling from the South Island, especially from around Marlborough, or Chardonnay and Pinot Gris, which happily grow in most areas. New Zealand's islands are bursting with natural delights, whether that's to look at, immerse yourself in, eat or drink. Most ports have a tourist information centre conveniently located for where we dock, and in New Zealand they are called I sites. So if you see anything with just the letter I, it says I-site, then you'll know that that is the tourist information, and generally speaking they are right by the port that we visit. If you pick up any good maps and stuff, feel free to share them with me afterwards as well. You know I like collecting these things. And we will, of course, continue doing our nightly sessions as well, where we'll talk about the ports before we get to each one. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the people of New Zealand in the talk Pioneers on the Edge. And you'll be amazed how much started in this very isolated part of the world. But for now, thank you very much for coming. I'm off back to bed.